Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Arubhyascha Kripasindubhya Evacha Patitanam Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Prasthaya Shikari. Can we keep one or two lights on? Otherwise it's like a movie. It's like a theater instead of... You can still see that? Yes. So I'm happy to be here. I mistakenly thought it was virtual, so half hour ago I was like, oh, we're done. But the mystic power of the VIHE here. So nice to see you. Okay, so let's get right into it. That's the title. And we'll be talking about this topic. And this can be conversational, so if you have any questions, comments, just raise your hand. In other words, it's not going to be like a whole lecture and then questions at the end, but in between, any thoughts that you have are more than welcome. So we do know that Krishna speaks, especially in many places, but especially at the end of the 9th chapter and the end of the 18th chapter, just about give it all up and just fully surrender to Him. Here he says, you always think of me, right? It's a very high standard. And similarly, in this verse, of course, one of the most famous verses, again, all the dharmas that you heard about previous to this, just as they say, I'm from New York, as they say in New York, they say, forget about it, which is that's one word, forget about it. But literally, forget about it, and just surrender to Krishna. And that was actually the title of Bhurijana Prabhu's book, Surrender Unto Me, was the title of his overview of the Gita. And we know that, the story of Arjuna practicing even at night his archery. Okay, that's cute. So then, in this 12th chapter, we hear about, then Krishna says, well, if you can't do that, no problem, then, follow a sadhana, practice, okay, of bhakti. So we're going to talk about living a balanced life. So how to do this. If you, anyone here able to fix their mind 24 hours a day on Krishna? Prabhu, you can do? 23 and a half? Okay. Half. Yeah. So that's the point. So then here Krishna is saying, okay, if you can't do that, then follow the regulated principles of Bhakti. That doesn't only mean the 4, but the 64 that are mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. And this way we develop that lolyam, that desire to serve Krishna. So part of that for us as sadhakas is to lead a balanced life. And here's the definition. Balance is an even distribution of weight, enabling one or something to remain upright and steady. So isn't that what we want to do in our bhakti? And we want to remain upright and steady. We don't want to be so sick that we're lying down all the time, and we don't want to be so anishtita that we're just like up one day and down the next, and in ecstasy and dancing in the kirtan one day, and the next day sleeping 20 hours. It's good, slow. There's a saying in English, slow and steady wins the race. Right? The tortoise outlasted the hare, if you know that story. Right? So balance is really important in practice, as for us as sadhakas. And we know this from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that until we reach the level of bhava, anyone on the level of bhava, raise your hand. That's a trick question because you wouldn't say it if you were. So that means you probably all are. But anyway, we have to take care of these four needs: physical, the emotional, the social, and the spiritual. And when I joined in the 70s, I thought it was just the spiritual. And we didn't know that Bhaktivinoda Thakur said this, really. So how to find this balance? It's so important for us. This is from, during the pandemic, I was working for the United States government, and I would give these, once a week, I would give these presentations called the Virtual Resilience Cafe. We had 70,000 employees in the place that I worked, and so hundreds and hundreds of people would come to these online. But if you look at it, it's not very, this is not from a bhakti source, but if you look at it, it's very similar to what we heard in Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, right? There's the emotional, the physical, you could say social, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, or relational, and cognitive and meaning making are kind of like, cognitive is, say, it's the use of our intelligence, so studying the Shastra, and meaning making is basically, kayami, what is the goal of life, what is the purpose? So that's very much spiritual. For us, we just turn that into, Bhagavad Gita, basically. So, Krishna makes it quite clear here in the Bhagavad Gita. And sleep is an interesting point, because if one is accustomed to, especially hearing Prabhupada's morning walks, his conversations, he'll be talking kind of in the mood of the six Goswamis of minimizing, because for a great devotee like Prabhupada, sleep is just what a waste of time, right? When I could be doing service. But we have to be careful about that. Also in the fourth canto, Prabhupada talks that if you don't get enough sleep, then your intelligence won't function. And has anyone ever had that experience when you really, yeah, right? It's just fog and clouds, right? If you don't get enough sleep. And I know that from personal experience. The last 2 nights I gave a class up until midnight because it was in America, and I was like, oh. And then also we read in Bhagavad Gita. Anyone know what Prabhupada says in the purport of Bhagavad Gita? How many hours you should get? Yes. Okay. But like many things with Srila Prabhupada, you have to look at all the things he said. So in some places he says 6 to 7. In some places he says no more than 8. So you have to look at your own individual physical needs and adjust according to that. I was once at it was called the SGGS, which is the Sangha of Gurus, GBCs, and Sannyasis. And one sannyasi, I won't mention his name, we were talking about taking care of our bodies, and he stood up and he said, I get 7 hours sleep a night. And everyone else like, whoa, how do you do that? And when I was a Sankirtan leader in America, I made sure that anyone who drove a car had to get 8 hours sleep. They were not allowed to get behind a wheel, because we had so many devotees getting car accidents, falling asleep at the wheel. So they had to get 8 hours. And then too much and too little in terms of eating, that again is, it also changes as we get older, right, Subal? Right? You can't, you still look like you're the same age as when I met you and you were a bacha, but both of us are getting older, right? So you can't have the 10 puris and sour cream, rich sabjis, and then 5 gulab jamans. Some of you can because you're young, but we have to adjust according to what's appropriate. Yeah. What did Prabhupada say? dress for others and eat for yourself, or something like that. Right.
Yesterday's quote,
What's that?
morning quote was yesterday's morning quote. Krishna Balam temple.
It was a morning quote,
Yeah.
at this point?
Somewhere like somewhere it was mentioned.
So, like this. Yeah. So that's why I wear a fancy kurta today. I usually wear. And then the same point, the next verse, right? Being regulated. And I remember when in the 70s we talked so much about regulation, and we would have, as brahmacharis, we would have prasadam at the same time every day. We'd take rest at the same time every day. We'd get up at the same time every day. We were extremely regulated. And in those days, Tamal Krishna Maharaj had given a class saying that if you chant all your rounds before Mangalarti, you'll go back to Godhead. So we all just, we all got up at 2:30 in the morning. Yeah. But anyway, the point about physical needs, it's really important to take care of and I can say that for myself now that I just turned 65, and I joined when I was 17 or something like that. And the thing I think that saved me physically, because I didn't eat very well, the thing that saved me is I was doing Sankirtan every day, and I must have gotten, they have these things where you count how many steps you get. I must have gotten 20,000 steps every day, because just running around approaching people all day long. And I think that was a good thing for the health. But otherwise, what we would sometimes eat on traveling Sankirtan wasn't the healthiest. But it really is important. It's unless we get some terrible disease early in life, life is a marathon, not a sprint. Right? It's long distance, and so many devotees do struggle with their health as they get older. Often because when they were younger, they didn't take care. Because you have the same liver, the same kidneys, the same heart. It's the same one that's with you when you're 65 than when you're 25. You don't get a different one. So what we do now affects what we do later. So taking care of our physical needs is important. Then what about social needs? This is a quote from the Bhagavatam: "The mental disease of the present generation is more acute than the bodily diseases." Yeah, and one time Prabhupada was with Bhurijana Prabhu, and he was concerned about his association, and he said that man is a social animal, and if you don't associate with devotees, you'll be forced to associate with non-devotees, and then you won't be able to follow the regulated principles, right? And I think pretty much in every language of the world, and I'm sure in French and so many different languages, there's some kind of saying like, "Tell me who you associate with, I'll tell you who you are." It's something like that, yeah. I know in Portuguese it's a very famous quote like that. And was it, which demon was it? Was it Kamsa? Was it Ravana who said that, or was it Hiranyakashipu who said that, we're like crystals? And you put a crystal next to something brown and it looks brown. You put crystal next to something this color and it looks this color, right? And we're very much affected by who we associate with. Yeah. And we do flourish if we have a sangha where we can be honest, vulnerable, even we feel safe, or in the Guyam Akyakti Prichati, that we can reveal our heart, reveal our mind to someone. And you don't need 100 friends on that level. If we have 2 or 3 friends like that in this world that we can really reveal our heart to, it's very, very healthy for our cultivation of bhakti. Right? What is that song? Ramachandra Sange Mage Naratamadasi. He had that close friendship. If you read Sitala Mataji's book on Narottama Das Thakur, the friendship with Ramachandra was so tight. And is Nirguna Mataji still here in Vrindavan?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know now. She had gone to.
Well, she tells the story of Prabhupada visiting her house when she was 14 years old, I think. and how Prabhupada was revealing his mind to her father, because they were of similar ages, and and Prabhupada had a few good friends. Anand Prabhu, his godbrother, who he said, he is my old god. OBL Kapoor, also Prabhupada spoke very highly of. So, and friendships are really important for this. I'm putting social and emotional kind of together here, okay? But it's really important to have friends. I feel very, very fortunate. I have like 3 really close friends. Brahmatirtha Prabhu, if you know him, from the Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. He's talking to Prabhupada. And Yogeshwar Prabhu, who started the movement in France. And Shonaka Rishi Prabhu, who's the director of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. And I do consider my wife a good friend, and in some ways my Guru Maharaj, Bhurijana Prabhu, because we're similar in ages almost. And yeah. Okay. Anything on physical or social emotional care? Comments, questions? You didn't think I was going to ask you? It's all good. Yes, Prabhu.
What would be the reason if you don't have friends?
What would be the reason if you don't have friends? I don't know if there's a reason, but it might indicate that we should seek out. It's just like, in the outside world, this word love is often used as a noun, right? It's a thing, right? But really, we know bhakti or love is a verb. You have to go out. It's an action. So friendship is also kind of like that. It doesn't just kind of, if it doesn't fall from the sky, now maybe if it does, by Krishna's arrangement, just fall from the sky, that's fantastic. But if it doesn't, then we try to seek it out. We try to find someone who is, what is that, swajatiya, swajati, is like-minded, and try to find ways to spend some time with them. Because friendship does take time. You can't just say, okay, let's have a deep relationship for 10 minutes, starting now, right? It often does require some give and take. Is that all right? Yeah. So if it's not surprising sometimes the world we live in, and it's all so virtual, that we may not have. So we should seek that. I found also even people, I don't know whether they were swajati or not. When we did traveling Sankirtan together, living in a van for months and months together, you either got in a fight every day or you had to develop a friendship because it was your only sangha, and we were living in this little van together. But doing austerities together, it's kind of like with Krishna and Sudama, right? When they performed that austerity and got stuck in the forest overnight, it really bonded their friendship. Right, going through, so being chased by police and and all kinds of things that happened to us when we did traveling Sankirtan. That really, I see that person now, 40 years later, and it's almost instant connection, even if we haven't talked in 40 years, just because we had that time together. Is that right? Yeah. Anything else on social or physical? So, doing some kind of exercise is good. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that for a yogi, walking is exercise. And of course, that was what Srila Prabhupada did. But if it's appropriate for you to do some pranayama, some yoga, whatever, these things can be health. You'll be very happy when you turn my age that you did that when you were younger. And we quoted this verse already, but the importance of this, it's not so hard to give prasadam, it's easy to accept prasadam. That's the easiest thing, right? And it's not so hard to give a gift, because here in Vrindavan you can give a gift of Brajaraj. It doesn't cost anything. But this is one of the hardest one probably of the 6, the 3 groups, right, to reveal one's mind in confidence and inquire confidentially. Yes, Prabhu?
Physical care, bro. Physical care.
Yes, physical care.
Some prefer for gym. Somebody prefer
Pay for a gym.
gym.
prefer.
Yes? So, I remember when I first saw a gym here, like in, I don't know what year it would have been, maybe like 1989. I'd stayed in Vrindavan for a number of years. I thought it was the funniest thing to see that in Vrindavan. It was right on the, maybe you saw that, Prashant, it was on the Prikram mark. And you see these guys. And it just, and these days, it probably wouldn't be such a surprise because there's everything in Vrindavan. But in those days, when they would, in those days you would see one car per day, maybe, in all of Vrindavan. You can't even imagine. Subal, maybe you remember. Yeah. So remember that gym? There was, yeah, for Kumar, yeah. It really depends. In some ways, it's not the greatest because there's a lot of generally non-devotee association. But if it's been prescribed to you as a need for your health, but usually there's probably more sattvic ways. But whatever you need, there are ways. It is some kind of thing that after 50, the muscles really start going downhill. So Devan Rita Maharaj told me. So he has these things that Bhurijana Prabhu gave him actually, that different ways that exercise the muscles. You've seen Bhurijana Prabhu, yeah. So, but you're not. Are you 50? Okay, so maybe you don't need to do that then. Okay, so spiritual, of course, we know, right? That's why we're here, right? Panchanga Bhakti. And have you studied? I don't know if you studied Nectar of Devotion yet, but you have, yeah. So there's the 59 Angas of Bhakti, and then these 5 are repeated again. They're amongst the 59, and then they're repeated again to make 64. And so you're all doing this, so we don't have to cover this so much. But that is the essential way to what is Rupa Goswami, that these are so powerful that they can invoke bhava even in a neophyte. Okay, so I've been told, I haven't literally seen the piece of paper, I've been told that in Vrindavan Prabhupada had on a piece of paper these priorities. And have you heard this, Prashanta? This?
Yeah, we have heard of it.
Yeah, but you haven't, yeah, okay. So health, but why health first? But has anyone ever tried to chant when you're really not feeling well? I find it hard to focus. There's no prana going on in the body, and it's hard. So health, sadhana, service. So just, and he signed his letters. I think that's the next. Right, he signed his letters. I hope this meets you in good health. And in the early days, he would be, Jadharani Mataji, her body was very frail, probably from birth, and Prabhupada would prescribe her you have to eat this and do that. Very somewhat detailed prescriptions on how to take care of her health. He was concerned for devotees' health. And then also we don't have to do it. We don't have to all of a sudden put on saffron and take off and stanestita, but take the time to hear. So from whatever position we're in Varnashram, take the time to hear and chant about Krishna. That is the what is it in the Chaitanya? That is the jal. That is the watering of the plant of bhakti, Shravanadi jal. That is so. And you all know this, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So let's talk about Khitri, even though it's Ekadasi. But we're not going to eat any Khitri. But you can learn a lot from Khitri. I don't know if you knew that. You can learn a lot from Khitri. There's a lot of lessons in Khitri. Because to make a good Khitri requires a really good balance of ingredients. Right? So any of you cooks? How many of you have cooked Khitri? Okay. So tell me if this is a good recipe. Okay, for those, okay? Is this a good recipe? No? Come on, this is a balance. We talked about how important it is to have a balanced life. You're all supposed to be samadarshina, and you're not saying this is not a good recipe.
The water would be nice.
Water would be nice. Okay, so like khichdi, the goal of a good khichdi is not to have the same amount of each ingredient, but to have the appropriate amount of each ingredient, right? So a balanced life is like a good khichdi. Okay? So lessons from khichdi. We pay attention to what a good khichdi tastes like. Right? Like Subal is a very good cook. He makes khichdi, then it'll be very good, right? So what does a good khichdi taste like? Especially, we should know what that is. So similarly, we should know what a good balanced life is. Right? We should know when we're kind of like, in the groove, we're really, and we should know when khichdi has gone off and, time to feed this to the other living entities. So similarly, we should be able to track when our balance is going off, and we're topsy turvy. We're schnick schnick giddy giddy ray ray chanting our rounds, in between other things and looking at YouTube videos while we're chanting or whatever. So we should have some idea when a khichdi is off, and so in an unbalanced life, and try to reach that equilibrium again as quickly as possible. And we, just like in khichdi, especially for accomplished cooks, you can, a good cook can experiment a little bit, okay? A little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, right? And my friend Henry, he hasn't been initiated for 45 years, but a very good devotee. And he's very well-to-do. And he has a house with 7 bedrooms. And so when Jamuna Mataji and Dina Tarani, her associate, when they needed a place to write the cookbook that she wrote, that big famous cookbook that she wrote that won so many awards, she stayed at Henry's house for about 2 years. And every day she would cook and experiment on the recipes. And Henry had the great fortune of testing them all. Yeah. And so, she was such an expert, she would adjust the recipes until she got it just right. So we also can adjust things a little bit. Okay, wake up a little earlier. No, make sure we get enough sleep. Chant our rounds at this time, chant our rounds at that time, read the Bhagavatam. Experiment a bit to see what works with your biorhythms. We have different times of the day when we have more energy and less energy, right? I think we probably all have that experience. And, what works and what's time to take rest, time to wake up. And you can experiment a little bit to get that optimum, that best time to do things in our life. You didn't think you could learn a lot from khichdi, right? There's a lot there. And the immediate goal, we want to know whatever I'm doing is the right thing to do. Sometimes, what do they call it? Ever heard of FOMO? What is it? Yes, fear of missing out. So we're doing something and we think, maybe I should be doing that. You ever had that experience like that? So we want to try to run our life in such a way that we know that whatever I'm doing right now is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. It's the right thing. Instead of, I wish I was doing that. I wish, hankering, lamenting. Right? Nasoshati, nakanshati. It's quite a meditation, actually. To have our schedule in our life in such a way, whatever I'm doing right now, this is what I should be doing. Okay? And finally, this was something that I learned from Bhurijana Prabhu. It's helped me so much. He probably told me this about 20 or 30 years ago, and I go back to it again and again. In any situation, we can be asking, because we're servants, right? Jivera Swarupahaya Krishnara Nityadas. We're servants of Krishna. So we're trying to identify as that. So in any situation we're in, what is my service? For me, this has helped a lot when people are talking ISKCON politics or Prajalpa. And I think, what is my service now? And usually I find, well, you know what my service is? Oh, Prabhu, I'm sorry, I have to go now. And I just go. I don't have to have an opinion about everything that comes up or this or that, or if someone's talking, criticism, another devotee, I think, what is my, okay. Prabhu, do you mind, how about, or I change the subject. What about that class today? Or even like, how do you like that paneer sabji yesterday? Anything, change the subject. You don't want to hear Vaishnava Aparad. But we can apply this in so many things in our life. It's such a lesson, I find. That I'm in this situation. What is my service in this situation? I'm in class right now. My service isn't to check my mobile phone. Right? My service is to listen. I'm chanting now. My service isn't to think about all the things I have to do the rest of the day. Right? So we can apply it to so many. Even I know I'd like to stay up longer because this reading is really nectar. But really, my service right now is to take rest, so I can have a good morning. As we used to, I don't know if Prabhupada. Yeah, I heard. Again, I haven't read it anywhere, but when we were younger devotees, we always heard that Prabhupada said a good morning program starts the night before. So whether he said that or not, it's totally true. Right? You take rest at the right time, you get up, you feel good. Okay, so Kitri. Next time you have Kitri, not today. You can meditate on all the, and by the way, I can provide this PowerPoint. It's not like I'm hiding it or something. Not that I own it. So now, some of you are unmarried, some of you are married, so some of these will not apply to you. Just, but we have different aspects of our life, right? Our sadhana, our health. I'm just calling it sharing, our preaching. Especially if you're not married, finances, family. But of course, even I was told in the Delhi temple, half of the brahmacharis get paid. And I said, what? And they said, yes, they send money back to their parents. So family doesn't mean you have to be married to have a family, right? You have, yeah. Service, if you have an occupation, friendships, intellectual needs, relaxation. You know that story about Srila Prabhupada? He came back from Africa, and he came to the Kolkata airport, and they asked for his yellow fever certification, and he didn't have it, so they put him in quarantine. Nice, because he was Prabhupada, they put him in a nice place with 2 disciples? I can't remember, it was 1 or 2. And he spent 6 days there in quarantine. And then he said, on the 7th day, call the temple, my yellow fever certificate is in my Elmira. And the devotee who was his servant just realized Prabhupada just wanted a break. He just wanted a break, and so quarantine was a nice break for him. So we do need so there's Krishna conscious relaxation that we can do, but sometimes the mind just needs to, especially if it's going a lot. So relaxation is there. Time alone and getting enough rest. So we have these different aspects in our life. Again, some may be more prominent than others, and the idea being that a good kitri is we figure out how much attention we need to give to these various aspects of our life. Because if you look at this is quite a list. And again, even if half of these apply to you, that's still 5 or 6. Yeah, so it's, life is not so simple. Unless you go to a village in Braj and do Madhukar, just sell your mobile phone. But I don't think most of us are going to do that. Okay. Any questions or thoughts about Kitri or about a balanced life?
These are the parts of Khichdi.
What?
These are all the parts of the Khichdi.
These are the parts of the Kitri, yes. Yeah, instead of, yeah. And you can add water to this. Yes. Yes, Prabhu.
I was wondering, I was reading a few times Dharma, and they had this unusual experience of having kirtans till late night and evenings.
Yeah.
Did they have the proper wake up, or this was kind of more, on the how it goes and how it comes.
They obviously didn't attend this class, right? Yes, well, great souls, and also there's times, I remember when I was a brahmachari, we would do the Sunday feast program. Then we would wash all the pots, and then we would, I don't know how we ended up doing this, then we would have like a 2-hour Tulsi Arti. First we'd start, and the temple was this huge mansion called the Fisher Mansion in Detroit. And the kirtan would go into every room and all over the place, and we probably wouldn't take rest till 1 o'clock in the morning. But but the next day was our day off. Just like I gave class like I said, in America up until midnight the last 2 nights. What to do with it? It was 6:30 in the morning for people in Los Angeles, so you couldn't really make it much earlier. So I performed the austerity. Sometimes for the marathon also, I can remember sometimes doing the Prabhupada marathon, and it would be like, we'd stay out late, and sometimes I'd be like leaning against the wall, falling asleep, waiting for the next person to come by to try to give them a book. But we were young also. So, like on Janmashtami, you can't say, okay, 9 o'clock, got to take rest, right? So, but the idea is a general rule, just like, what is that? Anyabi la sita, isn't that, Prashante, that the sita at the end means like in normal conditions? Yeah, right, ita, yeah, thank you. Right, so in normal conditions, we do this. Special conditions, you're in a kirtan with Bibi Govinda Maharaj or something, you're not going to say, oh, sorry Maharaj, I got to go now. I'm totally in bliss, I'm sweating, I'm chanting, but oh no, time to take, so you adjust. This is general principles, and there may be exceptions. Did you ever?
I think it's also part of the khichdi, some spice.
Yeah, thank you, very good. Yeah, a little cayenne in there. Yeah. Or maybe it's, the part of the khichdi where you, take the chili and you just eat alongside. Yeah. So we want our mind to be, the example given in the Bhagavad Gita. If we know that what we're doing is exactly what I should be doing right now, it is what my service is, I'm focused on that, our mind is so peaceful. Even that picture just makes you kind of, right? So here's a few tips about habits and things like that. So one thing we can do, you can actually print these out. They're on the you can use Google like time log, or everyone has a phone. You can do it on your phone, but keep track of your time for a few days. Now, for you, if you're students here, it's probably pretty good, right? But people in the world, especially when they have jobs and things, and they have unlimited access to their computers, how they think they spend their time and how they actually spend their time is sometimes really different. They're like, I spent 2 hours today on the internet? How did that happen? Right? You don't even notice it, right? But it can be a good way to just keep track of it. Every hour or something, you write down what I've done the last hour, and you look at it. You might say, that's great. No adjustments, right? Or you can say, well, I probably didn't have to, play that game on my phone. That was a waste of a half hour, right? Or, whatever. So we can ask ourselves, are we making a khichdi, or do we have more turmeric than rice? So here's a few self-reflections. Okay, so this is an intrapersonal exercise. So the first question is about our health. If you could magically, effortlessly change one habit regarding your health, what would it be? You don't have to say it out loud. But think about that for a second. Of all the ways that you deal with your body, if you could change one habit for your health, what would it be? And if you want to say it out loud, you want to say it. And if anyone wants to. Yes, Prabhu?
Starting to exercise every day.
Starting to exercise every day, yes. That's what, when I do this with non-devotees, they'll say, um, they'll say exercise almost inevitably, or something about eating. Anyone else want to share? You don't have to share. But yes, Brahmacharji.
Drinking sufficient water.
Drinking sufficient water. Okay, yes, that's. I went to this. We had this Ayurvedic person come to that SGGS, and he took my pulse and he said, 3 liters of water every day. I was like, how's that possible? Yes, Boo?
Sleeping early.
Sleeping early. Yes, Mataji.
Sleeping on time.
Sleeping on time. Yeah, because even if you're doing something really spiritual, you're reading Krishna book. This is so nectar, you know. Yes.
Just go to the Ayurvedic doctor and ask for advice.
Go to a doctor. Yeah, get a health checkup. Yeah. Yes, Mataji.
This is a question because you shared your Sankirtan experience. You keep up with your health because you walk a lot.
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you think from the experience of your lifetime, do you think walking is efficient exercise for the body?
Do I think walking is sufficient exercise? Well, certainly as you get older.
Because I hate gyms.
You hate gyms? Yeah, yeah. Certainly as you get older, but there are, I mean, I don't want to get, this is not a class on health, but there are a number of exercises one can do without equipment. There's even something, you can Google this, the Canadian, what is it? Royal Mounted Police had it. This is from the 1950s. They had like 11 minutes of exercise. And I have a couple of friends who do that and say they feel great, just 11 minutes every day. Don't need any, there are ways to do it without having to go to the gym, besides, in addition to walking. That's my point. Right, but yoga, for a lot of people, yoga is so sattvic. But I personally, I do push-ups, because I need to use some muscles, and I do something called planks, but these are a little more Westernish, but you can experiment with things. But there definitely are a lot of exercises you can do without going to a gym.
Prabhupada mentioned swimming and wrestling.
Yes, swimming and wrestling. Wrestling, you have to be a little careful at my age. But swimming is very good. Yes?
Dancing in a kirtan.
Yes, dancing in kirtan is perfect. Yeah, of course. That may be, that's more than sufficient. Yeah, okay. Okay, so next question, more introspection. If I could magically, effortlessly change one habit regarding my spiritual practices, what would it be? So think about that for a second. Your spiritual practices, what would it be? And again, when you're in the VIHE, I can remember my first VIHE was 1987. And it reminded me of, sometimes Prabhupada would mention this as an example. On the road, sometimes you see a person on a bicycle and they're holding on to a bus or a tractor, and they don't have to make any effort at all. They're just on. So in the VIHE, we had sadhana cards. You had to check, and I was such a good boy. My first VIHE, I had to check the whole month, every single, Samadhi Arti, Mangalarti, the whole thing. So I was kind of like, I felt like that. I was just on for the ride, in the VIHE. But what would, so think about that. And again, you don't have to share it out loud if you want to, fine. But it's a really important question, right? My friend Raghunath Prabhu, he has a saying, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Right? Because we can get so into this and into that, and the main thing is our spiritual. So anyone want to share? Again, you don't have to, but yes, Prabhu, and those both of you. A little louder, because.
I have a desire to read on a consistent basis every day for a certain period, certain time.
So more reading.
I want to set some time, and somehow or the other, despite other things that come up, I want to stay.
Yes. So more okay. Yes, Prabhu.
Chanting, I think.
Chanting, that's a good idea. Get up earlier? Okay, yeah. Early to bed, early to rise. You know that saying? Makes a man healthy, spiritually wealthy, and wise. There's no promise you're going to be wealthy. That's has a lot to do with your karma. Yeah, so we don't have Wi-Fi here, do we? We do. Maybe later I may show you a video. Remind me about a video about rocks, not Govardhan Shilas, but rocks. So about your point about, but usually devotees say something about reading or chanting, or going to bed early and getting up early. That's usually when I ask this question. Okay, but it's an important question. You know, if Prabhupada said health is super important, then we should be asking, what can I do to improve my health now? It's long. This is Shreyas and Prayas, right? Prayas is, right? I'll have that fifth puri. Shreyas is, I should eat carefully and take care of my health because I'm in this for the long run. Okay, another one. If I could, and I don't know if you have mental health issues. I don't mean that you're like deranged, but mental health could be social, you know. But if I could magically, effortlessly change one habit regarding my social life, my emotional life, I should change that instead of mental. What would it be? And this one may be a little personal, I won't ask you to, but think about how deep are your friendships? Do you have someone that you trust so implicitly that you could tell them your deepest, darkest secret and you know it is not going to show up on Facebook tomorrow, right, or in an email, and they're not going to ever use it against you? Do you have that kind of relationship? Do you take the time sometimes to be with friends? Yeah. And is there another? Yes. Anyway, it's the same one about social life. So these are just they're good questions to ask, right? What did Socrates say? The unexamined life is not worth living. So it's good to kind of like go up in a helicopter and look down at our life. How do I spend my 24 hours? What are my relationships like? You know, I sometimes, because I was working a job for a long time, so I often would wake up and I had this practice of the first thing I do when I wake up is think of one or two or three things that I'm grateful for. And I found that was a great way to start the day. Because it was always spiritual, something spiritual. I mean, for me it was almost always. And then I would often think, let me make every interaction that I have today somewhat uplifting. Now, if I'm at work, I can't tell everybody to chant Hare Krishna, right? But I often brought prasadam to work, or I just try to, be a good person, And then with devotees, of course, and that was such a nice meditation, like that. So again, thinking about our lives. Any questions, comments before we carry on? Okay. So here's some tips about changing habits. One is to monitor it. So when I was moving here to India, this devotee gave me this Apple Watch. I was like, really? Are you kidding? They're expensive. But anyway, he gave this to me. So it monitors how many steps I've taken. It monitors, how attentive my rounds were. No, it doesn't do that. But it does. It does. Every hour, if I've been sitting at a computer, it says time to stand up. But the idea is monitoring. If we want to make sure we read an hour a day, and again, that's probably easy when you're in the VIHE, but we can have a little timer. Something simple like this, and keep track of that. Or you've probably seen that VIHE Prabhu has that Be a Sage app, right? What? Page by page, yes. So you can set it for, like, I want to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita in a year, and it'll tell you exactly how many pages you have to read every day. And I think it's 41 pages of the Bhagavatam every day to read the whole Bhagavatam in a year, right? So you can set it for 2 years and make it 20 and a half pages a day, right, or whatever. But the idea is that sometimes things that you measure are good. Now, scheduling it, let's see, I'm just trying to think of the time here and if I have enough time to show this. I'll just give it theoretically, and if we have time at the end, I'll show the video. But the idea is, imagine if you had a glass jar and you have sand, you have little pebbles, and you have big rocks. Okay? Now, if you put the sand in first and then the pebbles, you can only fit a couple of rocks in. But if you put the rocks in first, you can usually fit those big rocks in, and then the sand and the pebbles will fit in between. So the rocks are the things like reading Prabhupada's books. The sand is, answering that email, or just kind of things that happen in life, right? And then they have to be done sometimes. But if you put the rocks in first, so if you actually have a schedule, you say, okay, this time for chanting, this time for reading, this time for taking prasad, and you do that, then the rest of the life can form. But if you put all the little things in, which are usually a little bit more fun and easy to do, they don't take as much drita, then there's not too much time for those rocks, right? So I don't know how many of you have jobs or had a job, but when you have a job and let's say you're supposed to meet with your superior at 4 o'clock, you're going to be there. You don't want to lose your job. So you're going to be there no matter what. So the idea is schedule things for your own personal needs as much as you would schedule that for a person. Let's say your Guru Maharaj says, come see me at 4 o'clock. You're going to be there, right? You're going to be there before 4 o'clock if you're smart, right? So do that. Make the important things in your life as important as that meeting with your Guru Maharaj, and keep it in the schedule. And unless an emergency comes up, unless you need to add, as Prashanta Mataji was saying, some special spice comes up in your life, keep that commitment to yourself as much as you would to the Bhagavatam or to Krishna's holy name. Now, you can, if a friend or a significant other, it'll warm up right after some time or something. You can ask people to keep you accountable, right? You can ask a friend, let's say you're living in the ashram, you say, ask me every evening how much I've read today, right? Or if I chanted all my rounds in one sitting, or if I didn't overeat, whatever you're trying to do in your life, ask somebody to be what they call an accountability partner. And maybe even do it together. You both want to do the same habit together, and you maybe even you read together, or you chant together, or you just at the end of the day ask each other. And that person's going to get on your case if you don't do it that day. So that can be really helpful in changing a habit. It takes time to develop a new habit, at least 60 days. So you have to really be kind of determined. And start small. I don't know if this is the same in India. Maybe it's during Diwali time instead of New Year's. But in the West, they have this New Year's resolutions, they call it, right? And people have this laundry list of things that they're going to do starting January 1st. They're going to get their health together. They're going to get their finances together. And they have this list. And you were talking about gyms, right? So gym membership shoots up in January. And the gyms are packed. And by March, they're mainly empty. Right? So the idea is to start small. It's kind of like, with your muscles, you're exercising your what's the word I'm looking for? Your muscles of, your habit. We could just say you're developing good habit muscles. And so you don't try to lift 150 kgs at more, that's crazy, but you don't try to lift the really heavy thing at first, right? You build yourself up slowly. Right? So again, I don't know if this would apply so much to you. I don't know your ashram situations, but devotees often can relate to this. Non-devotees can always relate to this in the West. And I say the first habit is just make your bed in the morning. right? Take the sheets and fold them nicely or whatever. Or if you're a brahmachari, and you just use a sleeping bag, roll up the sleeping bag nicely, and then, we would always train to wipe that area where you slept on the floor, right? But just, it's so tamasic almost to come back to your room and the place that you sleep is still kind of disheveled from the day. Even that one little habit is actually starts your day off in a more sattvic way. I've had non-devotees come to me and say, "Wow, what a change!" But then so you start with something small, and you can work your way up to the bigger things, or at least it can be a big thing, but only do one thing at a time. Don't try to change your whole life. What was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's saying? Progress is small changes towards perfection. Does anyone know that quote?
A series of small steps taken in the right direction.
Thank you. That's beautiful. A series of small. So that's what we're talking about here. Of course, he was mainly talking about spiritual things, but I can't remember the exact number, but the word gradual and gradually in the last 6 chapters of Prabhupada's Gita appears like 12 or 13 times. It's interesting. Right? So we don't want to be like, shoot, right? Which is what most people in the West do on New Year's resolutions. They just forget it. Next year. Slow and steady. Okay, I think that's the last tip. Oh, yeah. Well, we said there's some more tips. Yeah, a few more tips, and then I'll take questions, comments. Sometimes it helps to change habits away from a routine. Like for example, coming to the VIHE, if this is not your permanent place of service, you can get into good habits here and then carry them over to the rest of your life. Again, for non-devotees, it's often when they're on vacation, right? Or for devotees, it's when you come to the Dham, right? It's sometimes easier, not in that. You know what hamsters do? They just on this wheel and they just go around the wheel. So that's like what our life can be, almost like on cruise control or automatic pilot. So when you're away from that routine, sometimes it's easier to change habits. It's good to remember bad habits are easy to create, but they make our life harder. Good habits are harder to create, and they make our life easier. And it's about 45% of our life, and I think for devotees it's even more, is run by habits. Imagine if you woke up in the morning every day, think, okay, now what do I do? Right? But we have a habit. We wake up, we take care of our bedding, we brush our teeth, we take bath, right? You don't have to think about it every day. So habits actually clear our mind so we can focus on other things. Right? If you get in the habit of reading every day, then you don't have to think, oh, what am I going to read today? No, and then you can just focus on the reading. Right? If you have good habits, the only caveat to that, the only thing you have to be careful of is niyamagraha. Right? If you get into such good habits that you think, I'm just going through the motions without focusing on my bhakti. So that's the only thing we have to be a little careful about with habits, right? Because niyamagraha means kind of like doing all the rituals, but without the right mood. Or niyamagraha means forget about the schedule or anything. So that's just a little caveat. And what if we slip? Just pick yourself up and get back. Right? Just don't lament too long. Because one of the things I've seen over the years, if let's say a devotee has some problem with one of the regulated principles, and they feel really bad, and they're meditating, and if they're meditating, I feel so bad I did such and such, I feel so bad I did such and such, and they're thinking of the such and such, and we know dhyato visayapog sangasteshu, they're meditating on it, and they often will do it again. So it is of interest. Talk about balance. It is an interesting balance between appropriate regret and then getting on with life. Because if you regret too much, it can almost. In the first canto, Prabhupada's talking about Yudhishthira Maharaj, and he says that regret appears naturally in a good soul. So regret is good, But if you focus on it too much, it almost seems to go tamasic-ish. So you regret appropriately, then you get back. There's no prayaschita in bhakti, is studying nectar of instruction, except performing bhakti. And sometimes it helps to actually write down. I know for some of us, we're not used to having a pen and paper, so you can text it to yourself, but writing down a commitment can be helpful. Okay. Any thoughts on habits and tips on how to create them? Okay, there's still a little more. Nice. Okay, I have 10 more minutes. Yes, Prabhu, and then Prabhu. Yes. In the back.
Yes, Prabhu. One question is.
A little louder. I told you I'm 65.
Prabhu, actually, one question is that we can have a clear list of habits, we can focus on that. But when it comes to time management and emergency, this all get distracted and we need to shift, then the actual issues comes.
Yeah. So
How do you actually manage this?
emergencies will be there. And as the word that we use in ISKCON is doing the needful, right? They'll be there sometimes, like giving a class until midnight. It was the needful. I mean, I could have not done the class, but I decided it was important enough. So the idea is then to just get back on track as soon as practical. And that's why, when we first did we used to call it the Christmas marathon in those days, it was 3 days. And now here in India, it's like 6 weeks or something like that, isn't it? It's like, I don't know if they did. I mean, we used to literally not sleep for 3 days practically and just be out. I doubt that's what you do here in marathons. But we do have to be, or, Prabhupada had that amazing 2-month marathon for the Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? But that shouldn't be every day of our life, if possible. But try to go back to equilibrium as soon as we can after doing the needful. But we have to do the needful. I mean, I'm amazed. I keep on pointing to Subal, because Subal Prabhu and I have known each other for so long. And I could never get anything done in Vrindavan. I don't speak Hindi or anything. So I might call Subal at 2 in the morning and say, oh, the electricity's out. And Subal would just, do the needful. I wouldn't ask him to do that now. He's an old man. but so sometimes we do, if our Guru Maharaj says, can you do this? You can't say, oh, Guru Maharaj, I'm sorry, but it's my time for reading right now. I'd really like to do this service. Call me back in a couple hours after I read the Bhagavatam. Right? We're not going to do that, right? So even now I'm seeing that Bhurijana Prabhu, I'm initiated by Bhurijana Prabhu, and he's living right next door to me now in Govardhan. Just for the last 3 days, and I see my life has changed because I can't say Badme. I can't say later to him. Right. Yes, Prabhu?
You gave the example of Srila Prabhupada taking quarantine.
Yeah.
So initially when I was new to Krishna consciousness in California, I had a time when I decided to go to the Yosemite National Park.
Uh-huh.
When I expressed the reason, I was told that you are in Maya. You have to be like in devotees congregation by go there. So we keep hearing these kind of things.
Yeah, well, different shloks for different folks. It may depend on your level of bhakti. It may depend on, a bunch of things like that. So they might have been thinking, this is when you were a young devotee? They might have been thinking, no, just, focus on the Panchanga Bhakti and things like that, and don't, you may not be advanced enough to go to Yosemite and think of Krishna's universal form, and it's this beautiful place with mountains and everything. And I worked through the national park, so I know Yosemite when I had a job. So it depends on a lot of things, our practical things like that. Okay, there's a few more things before we end. So there's some symptoms of unbalance. If you start feeling kind of a lack of taste, that should be a warning sign, because we really need that param dristva, we really need that higher taste. And so we're starting feeling overly attracted to the mundane. You have a choice between the Bhagavatam and, Hindustan Times, and you choose the Hindustan Times, that's a symptom that we should do something about that. If we get easily upset, irritated, right? You know what it's like if you're kind of very affected by rajas and tamas, and a little thing could like get you going. And when you're more sattvic or Krishna conscious, and just like, oh. Koi Bhagne, no problem. I know like 5 words in Hindi. That's one of them. You're just feeling depleted physically, mentally, spiritually. So be careful of these points. And it's difficult. Your dealings with others are abrupt or unkind. So those are all symptoms of I have to get more balanced. So I thought we would just briefly talk about, because there's not much time, contradictory sayings. So some of these are just fun. I can barely read it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, better safe than sorry. They're both famous sayings, but they say the opposite. The pen is mightier than the sword. Actions speak louder than words. Look before you leap. He who hesitates is lost. And there's a lot of these. I won't go through them all. But the point is that it's sometimes the tyranny of or that we think in terms of black and white. And anyone who really deeply studies Prabhupada's books and his sayings, we see that they're not contradictions, but Prabhupada is saying in certain times, certain place, certain circumstance, he's emphasizing one thing, and in other places, like Varnashram, right? How many times you read, no, it's not possible in Kali Yuga, right? And he'll say 50% of, is Varna, or at least we've heard that from Abhiram Prabhu and others. I was just reading the 5th canto. Oh yeah, the class that we were doing for Bhakti Vaibhava. And one Prabhupada was saying, Krishna consciousness is very difficult. And the next one he's saying, no, it's very easy. Is that a contradiction? It's not a contradiction, actually. It's we experience sometimes the difficulty of uprooting the anarthas, and yet, compared to Gyan and karma, it's Prabhupada would even say, Gyanis would criticize that bhakti is so easy. And Prabhupada said, if it's so easy, why don't you do it? And he says, actually, it's not so easy if you actually follow in the footsteps of the Goswamis. And it's very much like that in so many things that we may study. There's different emphasis in different places, right? Some place probably would say, everyone, sannyas is mandatory after a certain age. And then other place, Bhakti would quote Bhaktivinoda Thakur that if your household life is Krishna conscious, there's no need for renunciation. Right? So it's often things are and, not or. Okay? Like in this example, right? How to kill him and not kill him. Ashwatthama. Right? So it's a different, at least for me as a Westerner, we often are trained in either or. But I find in Oriental cultures and India, the and is not so hard to understand. The famous story is, oh my God, I'm almost done, Prashanta, sorry. Can I have 2 more minutes? Yeah. I think it's Harisari who tells the story. One sannyasi comes into Prabhupada's room, pays obeisances. Prabhupada said, you are a sannyasi, you should not stay anywhere more than 3 days. Travel and preach. Yes, Prabhupada. 20 minutes later, another sannyasi comes in, pays. You're a sannyasi, you stay in such and such temple, don't travel, become the temple president. Yes, Prabhupada. And later the servant said, Prabhupada, and he said, do you think the spiritual master is a dull stone? He can't give one instruction for the benefit of that disciple and another instruction for the benefit of that disciple. So we have to, it's very important as people who study Prabhupada's books and who share Krishna consciousness with others to understand this point. It's a very important point. Otherwise you can kind of like, what? So we have to look at everything Prabhupada said. We don't want to, when I was a child, we would get these, at the holidays, we would get these candies. They were little wrapped candies, chocolates. And half of them were were milk chocolate, and half of them were dark chocolate. And my brother and I liked the milk chocolate. We didn't like the dark chocolate. So by the end of the holidays, all the milk chocolate was gone, and all the dark chocolate was still there. So sometimes we do that with Prabhupada quotes. We pick the ones that we like, and we somehow are very expert at ignoring the ones that we don't like so much, right? So, it's not Bhagavad Gita as it is, it's Bhagavad Gita as you like, right? So we shouldn't do that. We should look at everything Prabhupada said about a certain topic and try to understand pray to Prabhupada, try to understand in this situation what is, the biggest thing that changed. I almost didn't become a devotee because of the purports in chapter 1, verse 28 and 29. Because in one purport, Prabhupada is saying that Arjuna is a pure-hearted person, and so his crying is a sign of compassion. And the next purport, I'm not sure if it's the other way around, the next purport, no, this is material sentiment. But, then a devotee says, no, Prabhupada here is emphasizing the importance of Vaishnava compassion. And in the next purport, he's emphasizing the need to not have material concept of life. And I said, oh, okay, then I'll just take some more halava and stay here. So it's an important point in terms of balance. Just a couple of quotes, and then we'll end. The moment we want to believe something, we suddenly see all the arguments for it and become blind to the arguments against it. And I'm sure you've seen that. And then, famous quote, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So this is balance on a different level of understanding those. So I hope this was helpful, and I do want to end on time, or close to end on time. And thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Thank you, Vraja Vihari Prabhu. Vraja Vihari Prabhu has used to live in Vrindavan for many, many years, and then shifted to America for another many years. And now he's back. We have shifted his residence back in Govardhan. So we're hoping to have more of you here.
Of course, just ask me, and I'll make sure I know the difference between on Zoom and in person.
Sorry for that.
No, I went back and looked at the text message, and it said here at the VIHE, although I interpreted just meaning like here at the VIHE. Yeah. Thank you. And so Prashanta Mataji is the one who kind of saved my life, because I'm a terrible manager, and we were looking for a manager for the VIHE. And if I couldn't find one, it might have fallen back on me, which would have been a total disaster. And then we asked Prashanta many years ago. Talk about steady service. And it's amazing. This wasn't like it is now, believe me. This is all because of Prashanta Devi's incredible determination. It was like one room that was falling apart, basically. And now it's amazing. And I was running very poorly, managing the VIHE retreats, and now Prashanta Devi runs them, and they're like fantastic, and so it's just great management. So I'm very grateful to Prashanta.
So your art of delegation?
Yeah, the art of delegation, the art of giving responsibilities and running. Yeah, but amazing service that Prashanta does. Thank you very much for Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai.